Hey Changemaker! Welcome to Learning for Good, the only podcast that teaches nonprofit leaders how to leverage training to drive performance, improve capacity, and fuel their mission impact. Do you ever feel like your nonprofit is growing, but your people just aren't keeping up? Or like you're fixing the same problems over and over? Do you wonder how to build confident, capable staff who know how to lead, not just execute? If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I know how hard it can feel to get people to do what's expected of them. Trust me, I have 3 kids. I've tried telling people what to do and how. I've tried the traditional training approaches, and I realized that just doesn't work. And that's when I started researching what does work. Now I help mission-driven leaders use learning to drive performance, build capacity, and make change that lasts. And I'm sharing it all on this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. What comes to mind if I say Nike? What about Johnson & Johnson? You probably didn't hesitate to picture an athlete or athletic gear or the words "just do it" when I said Nike. And your brain probably softened as I offered Johnson & Johnson as the next brand. Nike has a bit of toughness to it, much different than the babies you might imagine with Johnson & Johnson. I think of a brand a bit like your identity, but it's shaped both by how you portray yourself and by how others perceive you. When I think of Dawn dish soap, I can't not think of ducks, but I've never cleaned a duck with Dawn. So Dawn shaped that brand. But then I think about Jeep, a brand that is known to have its quirks, and non-Jeep owners would hate dealing with those quirks. But Jeep owners love their Jeeps and would never dream of driving anything else. So their perception shapes that brand. Why am I talking about brands today? Well, we're going to step away from consumer brands and dive into your personal brand at work. Your job as an HR leader, as an L&D pro, as a nonprofit executive, your job requires influence. It's how you build credibility inside your organization so you can operate more strategically. So today I've invited branding expert Lauren Davis to join me on the podcast. And we'll talk about why building your personal brand is important and how to get started. Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. Lauren Davis is the founder of Lauren Davis Creative, a marketing and branding consultancy that helps speakers and entrepreneurs establish their memorable personal brands, resulting in magnetic engagement and lifelong clients. The skills Lauren acquired while building a successful brick-and-mortar record store for 15 years taught her how to see through manipulative one-hit wonder marketing tactics and instead build a personal brand that drives successful, meaningful relationships and profits. Today, she offers that same entrepreneurial support and, of course, great music recommendations for experts around the world. Lauren is a Midwest conference organizer, music lover, and featured marketing expert in Reader's Digest, Huffington Post, and on global top-rated podcasts. She also hosts the Real Personal Branding Podcast, a bi-weekly podcast where she uncovers the secret of personal brand building from some of the top thought leaders, speakers, authors, and coaches in the world. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so happy to be here, and I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
I feel like we're all just here at this point for the music recommendations.
I love adding that into my bio because people either completely ignore it or they're like super into it. And they're like, let's talk about music.
Right.
Let's get into that. I'm a huge music dork. I actually just joined a choir for the first time in 18 years. I was in choir my whole life. And as like a little hobby or side project this year, I actually joined the choir that sings with the symphony here in my city. And so it's been really fun going to practices again. Yes, big music lover.
Oh, I love that. I don't know. I'm curious to hear as we talk today if I can see like how that music lover piece of you plays out into personal branding and how you work and how you support other people. Because I feel like there are these things that are innate in us and
Mhm.
they show up in ways that we wouldn't expect and make us who we are. So I'm
Yeah,
excited.
I think that you'll see that creativity will definitely be a theme in how what we talk about today for sure. And I agree with you. I agree that personal branding does happen at the intersection of who you are in this world, how you show up, but also how people perceive you and the Venn diagram in the middle of both of those and like what parts you identify with in the middle of both of those pieces.
All right. I can't wait. I can't wait to dive in. I think this is going to be so important for everyone who's listening because everyone has a personal brand, whether they realize it or not. And so being able to really craft that and use it to our advantage is going to be huge. So, Lauren, welcome to the show. I can't wait for this conversation with you. And let's get going.
Yay, let's do it.
So, I always like to start with hearing a little bit about your career journey. I have found it very fascinating to see how all of the twists and turns play out to get you where you are. So, why do you care so much about personal branding? How did you get here today?
Okay, so it is a topsy turvy story. Let me tell you. I started my adult life starting a record store, and I was 19 when I started this record store with my co partner, my ex, also back then. We started it when I was 19, he was 25, and we really had no idea what we were doing. I always tell people like I was a little bit too green to quit at that moment. Like I didn't actually understand what I was doing, but I was like, I know I can do this. I know I want to do this. Let's see how I can make this work. And I really just took it upon myself to try to understand the psychology behind how people make decisions about what they're buying. And especially in 2008, 2009, 2007, it was like very much recession times and people were not spending their discretionary income on records and music and little gifts, right? So I dove way in on marketing, business, and I started realizing I really like this. I like really like understanding this. And not only from the side of how do you market something to sell, but just the really human side of it. What was making people decide to come to our little record shop in the Midwest and buy from us over the big box stores or over Amazon or online? I started really getting deep into the psychology of this. I started going back to school for it. And then people started noticing in our community. They started coming into our store and saying, Hey, Lauren, how are you getting people to come in here? How are you getting the news to come interview you? How are you getting national attention? And I was like, okay, let me break this down. Let me start writing these things down for myself. And as these local businesses were coming to me and asking me like what this was and how we were doing this, I was like, okay, so I was doing this and then I was doing this. I was creating this community and I was building this. And I ended up starting a non for profit for local businesses because I was like, I need to be able to help other local businesses have the same success. But not only that, I want to help them be able to collaborate with each other, learn from each other, gain the collective knowledge and experience from all of the people that they know in the community, and help save our community from being a cookie cutter community when we have all these really unique businesses to offer. So I started this non for profit, right? And at the same time, I started my consulting business and personal branding business. And as I was growing this nonprofit, which after 13 years, I walked away from that and the record store after 16 years. But at the time I walked away from the nonprofit, we were serving over 1,000 local businesses and managers in our community. So throughout the time that we were doing that, this like beautiful movement was getting started, and I was able to like go speak places and teach people about what I was doing and help build out these frameworks for them and help show them like how really understanding what your story is, really bringing your values out through who you are as a person, sharing your story with the people who want to collaborate with you and want to serve you can be an absolutely instrumental and magical power for your business, but also for you as a person and for you achieving the things that you really want to achieve in your life. And that sharing who I was, sharing my story throughout time, sharing my story that I really had no idea what I was doing when I started. I also had no idea what I was doing when I first started speaking. And I also had no idea what I was doing when I first started podcasting. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing when I first started a non-for-profit. And all of those things, I kind of hesitated, but then jumped off the cliff and figured it out along the way. And I used my story of how I learned how to do these things all along the way. And my vulnerability opened up a lot of doors for me. It opened up a lot of opportunities for me I would have never had otherwise. And my values and who I am as a person, that creativity, the things that made me really unique and the things that made my story really unique shone through. And that was really what helped me build my brand. So it became a very meta experience, if I'm being honest, saying like, okay, this is not only what helped me build my personal brand, but it's also how I learned how to talk about personal branding. And it's also how I've taught it now to influencers, entrepreneurs, CEOs, managers, and all people in all different spaces, how to build community around who you are and build loyalty around who you are, and to help you get the things that you want to achieve in life with using your personal brand.
Yeah, I love that you used your own experience and your story and tied that in. And I think we're probably going to hear a little bit more about how we can use our story in our personal brand. But before we get there, just so everybody's on the same page, what is a personal brand? When you say that term, what is that to you? And why is it important for someone who works inside of an organization to do this and not just an entrepreneur? It might make sense for, a business, an influencer, like you said, but why is it important for someone inside of an organization to also work through that personal brand?
Yeah, a personal brand is like this unified understanding of who you are. And it comes, like we said, at the intersection of who you want to be, what you're sharing with the world, how you want to share it, and also how people are perceiving it. So it's in the middle of that Venn diagram there. Personal branding is the act of developing that sense in the perceptive eye, right? Like in the public, I would say in the public eye, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean it's public, but how you're developing that sense of your brand. And so when I'm talking about personal brand, I'm talking about why it's important for somebody within an organization. There are a few angles that stand out to me. And one of them is just that employees, they really need a reliable understanding of who you are and what you're bringing to the table. And when people have familiarity with you and they understand what your values are, they understand how you're showing up in the world, what you care about, how you deliver information, and you do that very consistently, it reduces friction with the people that you're working with, and it speeds up a sense of, I can collaborate with this person. Like, I know that this is a person that I can work with, that we can get things done together, or that we can get the things done that we want to get done together, right? It also gives people a mental shortcut when they're thinking about you. So it could be as simple as like, she's the one who simplifies those really complex trainings. When I say values, like that could be a piece of your personal brand, right? Or like, oh, he's the one that always makes our team feel so supported and seen. That can be a sense of your personal brand right there as well. And I feel like inside organizations, people don't always get to choose their collaborators or choose the people that they're working with, but a clear personal brand can really help the people around you and the people who you do work with feel confident about coming to you. It can build that trust level with them, even if they don't really know you too well yet. And it also kind of reduces the hidden labor I find happens a lot, where you're having to prove yourself over and over again. If you stand for something and you are this person and that is the personal brand you're establishing, your reputation kind of starts doing that work for you.
Yeah, let's take that path for a minute, because I think that what I have found, what I have heard from a lot of L&D folks inside and outside of nonprofits, is there is this challenge of being respected for what you bring to the table. And a lot of folks feel like their value isn't seen. They aren't viewed as a strategic partner. They're brought to the table too late. Maybe there's a lack of trust with what they can offer, even though they feel like do a great job every time they're at the table. And so how, for L&D pros specifically, people who are really wanting to be seen as strategic partners and are struggling with this, how can a strong personal brand help them build that credibility and that influence inside their organization?
Well, the first thing I think that would possibly be helpful for some folks, if this feels safe to do so inside your working environment, is that I would ask a few people you work with what words come to mind when they're working with you. Because a lot of times we don't know the strengths that people see in us. We know what we perceive to be our strengths, but we don't necessarily know what others perceive to be our strengths. And so you might be surprised at some of the words that people share with you. And then I want you to compare those words that people share with how you want to be known, right? See which ones align with how you want to be known and start there, okay? But then as far as when people, especially in L&D, in nonprofits, when they want to be seen as strategic partners, I think a strong personal brand can help you build credibility and influence in the way that when people understand your point of view and trust your consistency, they're more likely to invite you to early conversations. And so if there is a way to develop some kind of repeatable strategy for yourself, like, for example, maybe at the end of every month, you send a short monthly internal email that kind of gives like a data snapshot or some kind of work that you're predicting or something that you're seeing, especially once you know the things that people find to be your best qualities and your best attributes. Maybe it's some kind of consistent, repeatable process where like every Monday you send a quick note to a couple people on your team and say, hey, I just love how you collaborated in this space, or I love how you did this thing. You use this as an internal routine for yourself to help you get in the mindset of being a partner. And whenever I talk about this with entrepreneurs all the time too, whenever you are on someone's podcast like this, like you and I are sharing a podcast episode together, or when you are speaking on a stage, or when you're coming to a meeting, like the best thing that you can always do is ask yourself, like, how can I be a partner in this situation? Instead of I'm the person that needs to do the tasks, or I'm the person who is a guest on this podcast. That is a really great way to get yourself into the energy of being a strategic partner and saying, like, I do have strategy to bring to the table. I have insights. But building those repeatable processes on the inside can help you build consistency, and consistency can help you become more of a strategic partner inside the eyes of others.
Do you wish you could connect with other nonprofit learning and development leaders? I know what it feels like to want someone to bounce ideas off of and to learn from, someone who really understands you and your work. Imagine if you could have a simple way to meet people in the field, ask questions, and share information. That's why I created the Nonprofit Learning and Development Collective, where nonprofit L&D, talent management, and DEI leaders can connect with each other quickly and easily in a virtual space. When you join this community, you will walk away with a new, diverse, and powerful network and a sounding board for your staff development needs. So if you're ready to exchange ideas and collaborate with your peers, come join the Nonprofit L&D Collective. I joked a few times. I feel like sometimes we in L&D are so busy, like clawing our way to the table, the metaphorical table, that we get ourselves uninvited. And so I love that you actually brought in a little bit of the mindset piece there, like to approach every situation like you are a partner. I think because historically L&D has not been viewed as a partner, we actually come with that mindset of we're not going to be respected. We're not going to be valued for what we have to offer. And so we don't approach as a partner. So I love that you brought that piece of it into it. And then what I'm hearing from you, just not just with this part of the conversation, but even earlier, there's a consistency piece that has to exist. And so figuring out what that brand is that we want to have to portray, and figure out ways to consistently show up that way, to consistently reinforce that brand, is going to be key to actually being recognized for that.
It's almost like looking through a filter. How can I show up with the this filter of consistency and add fill in the blank, whatever value it is that you want to show up as. And if you look at your experience and your existence within this company through that filter, you can see very clearly where you might have a gap and where you're exceeding what the expectations are. And I also think it is really helpful in your internal brand to communicate why behind your recommendations versus just the how, because then it allows you to naturally just share things that are important and share your expertise. Like, why is this important versus do this or we need to do this? And that can really help elevate your personal brand within your companies as well.
And that conversation, right? That becomes a partnership conversation when you're saying, absolutely, here's why I think we should do it this way. Here's why I'm recommending this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that with the consistency piece can be a huge game changer, but also, like you said, for your mindset, like for how you believe who you believe you are and how you believe you're showing up at work.
Yeah. Now, I would imagine that some people listening to this are not 100% sure the answer to that question. There's not complete clarity around who they want to be at work, who they want to show up as. So how does getting clear, having that clarity, or maybe even the lack thereof, how does that impact their ability to build these strong internal partnerships?
This is a tough one because when there is a lack of clarity, people fill in the gaps for you. And that can be really tough because you don't want people to fill in the gaps where they don't need to exist. And also, everyone comes with their own personal biases about who you are based on their 3-second first impression of you. And that can be really tough too. But when you are clear, your communication becomes proactive instead of reactive. And when you're intentional, it does the same thing. So clarity helps people feel grounded when they collaborate with you. And one of the ways that you can do this is just write down for yourself in your own journal or your own notebook, what are 3 things that you want every internal partner to say after working with you? What are the things that you want them to say to themselves after working with you? Use that again as a filter of how you show up. I find that if you feel like you're not necessarily clear on who you are, it can be really hard to look into the future and look into this black hole and pull out, oh, this is who I want my personal brand to be. And that's where that exercise of asking a few people at work, and if it doesn't feel safe to ask that at work, maybe ask a few people you've worked with in the past. Or maybe ask a few people in your life who see you in some fashion in a professional way and ask what some of your best qualities are. Start there. These are baby steps, okay? You don't I think my pet peeve is when people say I'm creating a personal brand or building a personal brand, because no matter what you are, you already have a personal brand. Everyone does. You're an influencer within your own network. You're an influencer at work. You're an influencer with the people you talk to and the people you love. And you already have influence in some fashion, in some capacity. So it's just a matter of finding out what it is. And sometimes some people have a harder time than others doing that. That's very normal. I just want to normalize that for you and say that's completely normal to just not know. But start by seeing what people you love share are your best qualities, and then also figure out which ones of those you align with. Sometimes people say things to me like I'm their business therapist or something, and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't really align with that. I feel really grateful that people think of me as that's how much I'm helping them. But I'm also please don't call me that, because that's not what I do. However, when people tell me it might be the same exact thing that I'm doing for one person, but one person says it one way, one person says it the other. But the other way that they say it is I'm helping them get the confidence in their personal brand enough to get way more visibility and get way more advances in what they want to do. And that kind of stuff feels very empowering to me. So I'm able to latch on to what this person has said and say, okay, I'm going to use this and I'm going to really embody this whenever I go into any situation. And then just a little fun tip for you. If you're going straight into a meeting when you get to work, blast your favorite song that makes you feel so freaking special and so empowered. Mine is like any song off the Lemonade album by Beyonce. I don't know why, but that whole album is just like, it makes me feel so fired up. So I do that. I imagine a big ball of energy around me, a big ball of fiery energy around me. And then I say, like, the only things that can come inside this energy are the things that I want and that I know are going to make my life better. And then I walk into that meeting with so much confidence. And I would never identify with how much confidence that person has, like just in a random everyday moment. But it helps me so much understand like how I'm showing up and who I'm showing up as. And generally, it helps me get the thing that I want when I walk into that meeting.
I knew we would see music in our conversation. So I love that you brought that in. So it sounds like, okay, if a nonprofit training person is sitting here, I am not clear, I don't know how to do this. Some of the things that you recommended, talk to people that you're partnering with already, if you feel comfortable, and ask them what comes to mind. And then compare that to how you want to be known. So what are those things that you want people to say about you after you've worked with them? And then use that to kind of find your Venn diagram, right? That central point of how you are and will be known. And then how do we then start to embody that? You mentioned once you have it, it's a little easier to embody it. And for you, maybe that comes with the music and some other things, but how can we start to embody that so that we are seen and we are building influence and we are becoming those partners that we want to be?
So I think about this as how I think about boundaries, right? Like boundaries, there's so much memes on the internet about boundaries and little texts and stuff, and boundaries about like setting boundaries with people and all of this stuff. But boundaries are really for us, right? Boundaries are rules for us to live a better life. They're not necessarily for other people, they're for us, and they help us have relationships with other people. And so I think about this in the same way. Like you get to do the work on yourself to create a better life for yourself. And sometimes people around you will be receptive to it. Sometimes they won't be as receptive to it. But there's no harm in bettering yourself and developing yourself ever, right? You can always like move yourself forward, even the tiniest little baby steps. But here are a few things to just keep it really simple and practical. One, like we already talked about, identify how you naturally operate. So think about the patterns in your work and what you always prioritize, and like the way you approach problem solving and like how people describe their experience with you, all of that stuff that we already talked about. Two, define for yourself the experience you want to create. So consider how you want colleagues to feel before, during, and after working with you. We talked about that too. And then three, clean up some of your internal touch points. So this includes how you write emails, the way you present ideas, the consistency of your follow-up, the documentation you produce. Take all of that stuff and run it through the filter of those first two steps. Communicate proactively. That can be a way to be a lot more clear in your communication, but just being a little bit more proactive about it. So share context, like the why, not the how. Learning trends, small insights, even if it's like a small insight to just share. Like I have a client who shares with her boss, hey, I'm predicting that something like this might happen because this feels like very similar to when this happened. And here are some steps that I worked on to mitigate that if it does happen. And because she does that with her CEO quite a bit, it becomes this relationship where he feels that she is like a wise sage in her role, right? And so this has become her personal brand through her work, is that she is this wise sage to him. So communicate proactively. You can apply that however it makes sense within your role, but being proactive about it can really help produce clarity. And then building relationships before you need them. So set aside time to just connect with people in your organization, to show up as a partner to them, to say, like, how am I going to show up and be helpful to you? Even if that's the question you ask yourself, and not necessarily overextending yourself at work, but just the question that you're asking yourself internally, like, how am I showing up as a partner? How can I make this a cross-functional partnership within our organization? And that will also help them in turn understand you beyond just deliverables that you give them. And then lastly, just look for one internal platform where you can show your thinking. So whether that might be like a message you send once a week, or maybe that's a meeting that you are encouraged to set up, but maybe you just haven't gotten around to it yet, but that people would be excited to be part of. Maybe it's a post within your inner meeting function. Maybe it's a simple monthly update, but just something simple where you can kind of show that personal brand and start developing it over time with the people that you talk to. And I think with all of those things and picking maybe one of those things and just trying to be consistent with it for just a short amount of time will really help you get your feet up on the next step, right? And if you get your feet on the next step, you might say, hey, I think I could lean into one more of these personal branding principles and start walking up to the next step after that. Don't try to do everything all at once.
I think that's wise advice for most things in life, right? Don't try to do everything all at once. No, this is so practical, like simple ways that we can start to figure out who we want to be perceived as, right? We want our brand to look like, and then how we can help bring that to life. To your point, looking at how we communicate with other people, how we write emails, what documentation we provide. I was thinking as you were talking even about some of my own things with clients, right? Like I produce an insights report at the end of the needs analysis phase. So once I've done the work to figure out what are the challenges, what are the pain points, what are the gaps, I create a report based on that. So thinking through some of the things that I'm already doing, how can I add to or modify or even take away from? Sometimes you're doing things that you like that are not aligned with your personal brands. We need to remove some things. And so, my brain was already going, and hopefully people who are listening are also thinking about ways that they can modify what they're doing to really show up as who they want to be perceived as.
I actually love that you mentioned this because it's something I didn't necessarily say, but I think this is so important. And you just brought it up to my attention is that sometimes things that you're doing are not at all aligned with what anyone expects from you or what you expect from yourself or what you even like doing. And those things you could replace those things with things that feel more aligned to what your expectations are, what your personal brand is, and you might make your life a little bit better in that space.
It's almost like the traditional start, stop, continue exercise. Once you figure out how you want to be known, what are the things you need to start doing to be known that way? What do you need to stop doing to be known that way? And what are you doing that's working that you need to continue doing?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, great point.
Lauren, this has been so helpful. Any final words of advice or encouragement as people take this path towards personal branding?
I think the thing that I always go back to that makes me feel so empowered, and hopefully it will for you too, is that anything you want can be done if you break it into small enough steps. And that has been a really hard lesson for me to learn because I always see this end result and I'm like, okay, there's only 2 steps to get there. I just have to do this and this. But I never have broken down until the last maybe 10 years of my life that those 2 steps have 35 steps beneath each of them. And so if you can I strongly believe we can do anything we want. Everyone here can do anything they want, but you have to break it up into small enough steps. And once you do, you can start crossing out those steps. And crossing out those steps can be one of the most empowering exercises that you'll ever do. But you have to write down the little steps first. Because if you're just waiting to cross out the 2 you think were there, it might be a while before you cross it out. And I don't want you to get discouraged before you get there.
So good. Lauren, thank you for joining me today.
Of course. Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
This was such a practical conversation because we all have a personal brand, whether we realize it or not. And we really want to make sure we're intentional about how we're showing up. And so what Lauren shared, basically, it kind of actually mirrors the learning design process, right? You need to assess the situation. How do we want to be known? How are we known currently? We can identify that, right? That's half the battle. And then once we have that, we can start to take steps and figure out how we can embody that personal brand. So what are the things we need to start? What do we need to stop? And what do we need to continue to make sure that we really embody the brand that we want? And it's through this personal brand and showing up consistently that we're building trust, that we're reducing friction, and that we're able to be the strategic partners that we need to be in our organizations. If this is something that you want to continue to explore, I invite you to join us for Career Week. The nonprofit L&D Collective is hosting a Career Week in January. I'll drop the information in the show notes, but we would love to have you there. We're going to have a personal branding session along with lots of other really great sessions to help you build your L&D career, both from a career search perspective and from the skill building perspective, to make sure that you have the skills you need to continue to show up as a strategic partner and to build the career that you really want. So join us for Career Week if you want more support in this area, and I will see you there. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.
Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice, share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.